There you go.
All right, we are live. I don't think we have any actual patrons showing up so far, but hopefully they'll come in because this is a hangout especially for them, live to the world. But if you're a patron, you can actually come in and join us on the microphone. And we've just been talking about Venezuela a little more specifically, and in general, communism and socialism. But there's no set topic. We can talk about whatever you guys want to. So
I think we should start off with introductions to each other, because I'm not familiar with everybody in here.
Yeah, this is the first time I've seen you, so why don't you tell us who you are and a little bit about you.
So, I recently got into like socialism and these types of things. I'm actually quite a new member to these kind of groups. My first real introduction out of capitalist tendencies was reading Max Stirner and understanding the ego and the revelation of the spook. But then that really led me to the ideals of Proudhon and Tucker. But from there, I realized the inefficiency of scarcity, or inflating an artificial scarcity. So I went to more collectivist tendencies.
And we also have Chris Hangartner, who is away from the keyboard at the moment. We have Daniel Wilcox, most of you know him. And we also have a patron, It's a Banans. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that the way you'd want to, but welcome.
Yo, hey. Yeah, you're good.
I always said get the banana.
Yeah, just bananas. That'll be fine.
Bananas.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is interesting. We've got another leftist on, so.
What, me?
No,
No, this Anarcho, whatever. I can't see the rest of his name. I just see Anarcho.
I just chose a dumb YouTube name.
And I'm back. Sorry, had to take a potty break.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd invite some. I thought I'd send a link in the Crossroads, see if I could spice things up.
That's good. I like getting some different opinions in here. Although I will point out that this is primarily for the patrons, so I reserve the right to kick out non-patrons if it gets full and some others want to come in. So Huge Sinker just joined us, so welcome.
It's no big deal. I'm glad to be here. It's fun.
Okay.
Say hello, Huge Sinker.
Just please don't send me to Siberia for disagreeing with you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
When Chris shuts up, which
I never do.
So, Sinker, wait, I know you, Sinker.
He's all over the place in the comments. Are you on the forum too?
Familiar.
No, I don't usually do the forum.
Okay.
I knew that name seemed familiar.
Yeah, he's all over the place in the comments. First he was there, then he was there, then he was there, then he was there, and then he was over there. Now he's here.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
Cool to be on with you, though. I've been watching your stuff for a real long time.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've been seeing you down there in the comments, but this is the first chance we've ever actually spoken.
Yeah.
And I know I recognized Itza from the Discord.
Yeah.
And now all we need to do is get Tom Woods on here.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I'm not familiar with the platform.
What, Discord?
No. Like what you guys have here. Do you guys usually do this?
I usually try to do like once a month for the patrons, and a lot of times if I'm not able to do the podcast for some reason, we'll come in and just quickly and go over all the stories live. But it's a lot better when we can do a proper podcast and I can edit them. But for something like this is just something for the patrons to be able to come in and interact with me. So it's just something a little special, no set topic or anything.
Yep. We try to keep it serious and talk about philosophy and economics and all that, but it often gets end up on the trail, then we end up talking about Star Trek and Doctor Who a lot.
And the Civil War for some reason. We keep going back to that.
I was on a stream with True Deal Tom, and he was originally reading Capital, like the first volume Capital of Karl Marx. Then we just started talking about how traps were gay or not. So I mean,
sounds like the average day in the Crossroads.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. I usually just use these as an excuse to stir shit up.
Daniel invites the interesting people.
Yeah. As long as it's not that one guy who I was in this wasn't Crossroads, it was in the
Great Hall.
the Great Hall, yeah, and he
Fucking
we,
ninja.
we were discussing
Or
we were discussing Marxism and all that, and I was criticizing Karl Marx, and then he using mathematics and all that, and then he pulled the homework fallacy on me. Saying don't criticize Marx unless you've actually read his entire work from page to back.
I don't even think Marxists have done that.
Yeah.
No, yeah,
I think
that's
they're
like
the
a total
last
of
people who have done that.
Yeah.
It's like 3,000 words. Oh, well, no, not 3,000 pages, like altogether with
Yeah.
all volume 1 2.
I actually told this
Capital's
guy
a fucking venture. I don't know how people do that shit.
and actually the guy who I told it to, I even really ticked him off because I told him, you know what? Well, by that logic, then you have no right to criticize Nazism unless you read Mein Kampf from beginning to end.
To be fair, a lot of us are fairly certain Ninja has read Mein Kampf religiously.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he said he's read it.
Yeah.
Because we were trying to talk about fascism, and he actually did that to me. He's like, have you not read Mein Kampf?
Yeah. Yeah. Although to be fair, a lot of people, particularly on the left, can't seem to know the difference between fascism and all that. It's like, believe it or not, even George Orwell didn't like the term fascism. I think I forgot the exact quote. So I'm just gonna
used.
Yeah,
Orwell
We don't like the term fascism because it's not what we.
Yeah, Orwell was very much. Orwell was very much a linguistic
used because there are
precision.
there is a legitimate political ideology called fascism. The problem is that, and I'm just going to paraphrase George Orwell here, it's used to the point where it's used to describe police officers, labor unionists, some politicians, businessmen, and even fox hunters. It's like,
Yeah, basically anyone you don't like. I think it's like that meme says. It's like, I don't
We
know
see
what
this a lot in the
capitalism-
American circus.
Yeah, it says I don't know what capitalism is, so I'll call it fascism because I don't know what that is either.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
necessarily that fascism is capitalism, but it's rather the effects of late-stage capitalism can instate the effects of fascism.
Yeah,
Which
I don't
is-
even get this
fascism
stuff
is
like
something not
late
even
stage
called
capitalism. Capitalism
Hold on.
is an economy of voluntary interactions, and anytime I hear someone talk about the late stage capitalism, whatever, and I'm like, what are you talking about? They point to examples of
Wait,
things
I
like
have a
mercantilism and
question.
things like that, things that capitalism
Hey,
was invented to go against.
Shane, hold on. Could you?
Could you elaborate around the voluntary transactions? Because how would it be voluntary with the coercion of artificial scarcity?
Well, you're not really supposed to have an artificial scarcity with capitalism. It's kind of just the opposite. Artificial scarcity is
But
what you
we
get
do
with things
see
like
this because
mercantilism.
people have to buy food and people have to buy a place to live, and people are essentially.
That's true no matter
coerced
what.
into
That's
anything.
Yeah,
been
that's
the
reality.
case.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's-
it's coercion. It's not. What's the word?
Oh,
Hegemony.
no. If you were out like on a desert island, like Tom Hanks in Castaway, you'd still have to work for your food, and you'd still have to work to get a
Yeah,
place to
that's-
stay.
yeah.
Oh, I agree, but we
Yeah,
have
Shane
the
did a
ability
quickie
to
on that.
provide
Shane
for
did a quickie on
everybody's
that. It's called
scarcity needs
it's what we
in
like to call the worker
age
star
of today.
fallacy. It's what we like to call the worker star fallacy. It's when a lot of people say, capitalism
remember-
is.
We have the ability to provide for everybody's scarcity needs within the current age, especially with the.
When
Especially
you
with
have
the
capitalism,
introduction
and as
of
soon as you bring in
automizing.
socialism, it all goes to pot.
Yeah,
What do you
I
mean?
mean,
Wait. I have a-
Wait.
what
Can
do
we
you guys- What do you guys think
excuse me?
socialism is?
Excuse me. Can we each define terms for right off the bat here?
Okay, I'll define capitalism, and I'll let Anarcho, whoever, define socialism.
That's
Capitalism is the private ownership of capital, which means that all of the decisions about buying and selling and things like that are left to individuals who interact voluntarily, and it's not imposed from the top down by any sort of government or other system like that.
Would you like to define socialism?
I was going to let you do that.
Oh no, because I want to know how you define it. Because you've said it a couple times,
Okay.
but I don't really think it.
Yeah,
correlates.
socialism is when you have that means of production or ownership put in the hands of a collective of some kind, usually directed by the government, as opposed to individuals and groups of individuals interacting voluntarily.
See, that's where I'd have to say that you're wrong, because according to this, socialism is akin to fascism in the sense that the government essentially owns the means of production, and all distribution or whatever is up to those in the governing body. The point of socialism is to essentially bring about democracy among those who work, rather than giving the democratic powers to the people who just simply own the property. And you don't necessarily have to equate this to markets, because socialism can have markets. Just
For
that
what?
most
But again,
socialists
we
do
see
not
this
prefer to have
distinction between workers and business owners. Don't business owners put in a lot of work? I'm a business owner and I work my ass off.
Are you petite bourgeoisie?
What?
Tell me what to
Because
do about it.
most people,
Petite bourgeois.
bourgeoisie refers to small business owners who still have to work.
Okay, so what's the
Because-
distinction between that and the proper bourgeoisie? Where's
Yeah,
the line drawn?
A lot of what we're saying something is that a lot of it tends to seem arbitrary. Sorry, go on.
The proper bourgeoisie are people who wouldn't necessarily have to work, or work very minimally due to their property ownership. But
Well, the only
idea
people I know to
is
do
that you have the ability to profit off other people's labor just because you own the
only
land
people I
that
know
they're
who are
working
like
upon.
that is the government. Because, I mean, if you look at,
The
like,
government.
Bill Gates, when Bill Gates was owner of Microsoft, you don't think he worked his ass off, even though he was, making billions?
Oh, I agree. But why does that make him the owner of other people's labor, and thus the
He
surplus
doesn't.
value
They
derived?
own their labor, and then they voluntarily exchange some of that labor.
We've
for
already
a wage.
gone over why this isn't a voluntary exchange. It's
No,
because
we
they're
haven't.
coerced
That's
into doing
not a
so.
voluntary
Hey,
exchange.
hold on. One after the other, please.
Again, we went over this earlier. You admitted it was voluntary, but it was coerced action. They were
No,
essentially
my
forced to
point
do
was it was not coerced. You were
How
saying
so?
it was coercive, and I was saying, like, even if you're on all by yourself on a desert island somewhere, you would still have to put in work.
Yeah, it's not an
Yes,
artificial
I'm not saying you don't have to work.
the state of nature.
Nobody
I
is
think-
saying
but-
you don't have to work. The
if I
idea is
may-
that
Then
we
where's
have
the
the
coercion?
ability to provide for everybody.
Where's the coercion?
Excuse me. I think.
coercion-
Excuse me. Somethingism. I'm sorry. If I may try to fill the gap here, I think what somethingism is under the impression. This has been a common dispute I've noticed, and I've seen it happen before. But it's there's been this idea that there's this false dichotomy of capitalist and socialist structures, where if there's capitalism, then any situation is work for a boss or starve. When I don't think that's the case. You can structure a business around a workers' collective, for example. There's actually a very successful one in Spain.
Or just create your own business. No one's stopping you. Or if they are, it's a government, and that's mercantilism.
Yeah, there was I don't know if it was Tom Woods, but there was this other philosopher who's an anarcho-capitalist, and he said the cruel irony that a lot of anarcho-communists, don't realize is that you can be a Marxist and an anarcho-capitalist society so as long as, you don't tell other people, okay, redistribute your property and your labor to the Marxist group, or else we're going to send people with guns after you. If you just form your own little commune and just work without you, don't interfere with anyone else, including another business who's operating under the capitalist system, we're okay with that.
Yeah, I've got a whole video on that.
Yeah. But
it's kind of ironic because you're talking about people forcing socialism down to people, while simultaneously the whole structure of capitalism is forcing people to live under private property.
How on earth do you think
you kind of know what I mean? You're instating this
I don't have the
law
first clue
that
what you mean.
inherently allows people to steal the surplus value of others.
Could you please define these terms? Like how I would
property.
Let's just start with surplus value. Let's start with
steal
value. Tell us.
Okay, if you want, surplus value is a value. To put it as simple as possible, it's a profit that is derived by labor.
Okay, here's what our problem is. That you're working under labor theory of value, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm not.
It's bunk.
Entirely familiar.
Yeah, it's bunk. Yeah, labor.
That's what it is. It's been debunked for well over a century.
Well, go ahead.
Because I mean, think about it. Think about it. If there's this extra surplus that this poor exploited worker is being robbed of, then why couldn't the worker just go on his own somewhere else, do the same amount of work, and get that extra surplus for himself?
No, the idea is that because they have to work under private property, that the person who owns the private property will always get a portion of the surplus value. The worker will never receive what they earned.
What does that mean, what they earn?
That they earn is the surplus value that they derive
what
through their labor.
Surplus value assumes intrinsic theory of value.
You're right. Value is
so.
subjective.
And not only that, there's also time preference
I
too.
was not arguing objective value. If
the whole reason
are you
why,
understanding? Because I laid down the terms.
Well, the whole reason
surplus
why
value
you have
is
this,
the value derived through labor.
The whole reason why
this is what people make a profit under in capitalism.
Hold on, something.
The whole reason why you have this whole employer-employee relationship is because when the employee works for a wage, he thinks that the wage that he gets has greater value than the time and effort he's put into it, but the employer thinks that the amount that he's giving the worker, he's getting a better value out of the worker's labor than he is the amount of money he's putting into it, and both sides come out ahead, and that's the very basis of an economic transaction.
Oh, I agree, but the problem is that capitalism and the use of private property essentially makes you work for somebody under their private property rather than co-opting with other workers to each.
Why can't you co-opt? Who's stopping you from co-opting?
Yeah, we're I don't see why private
there's
property.
no reason why you can't form a co-op underneath your private property.
Somebody have to buy private property? Oh, actually, you want to know an interesting fact on co-ops in the current age? Most co-ops can't even get a bank loan. And the chances are, if you're able to start a business without a loan, you're most likely already bourgeois and don't give a shit about
Which
worker
is why
ownership.
we need to get government out of the banking industry, because if we had a free market in banking, that would be this whole market opened up, and the first banker to come in and offer loans to co-ops would end up being able to make a lot of money,
No, according to them, co-ops aren't profitable because co-ops are worker-focused and around worker profits rather than corporate interests.
Can you cite this, please?
Well, that's a cost. That's a sunk cost for having to pay back your loan. I mean, will they get the money back or not? That's the only question they have to answer.
I just stated how it was de-incentivized for worker cooperatives to form inside a capitalist system.
Well, I mean that's the thing though, as Thinker was just saying, they're not doing it because they inherently hate communism or cooperativism. It's just that, look, at the end of the day, they are a business and they do have to look after their assets and their employees. So, that's why on paper, they're going to probably take the corporate over the small, co-op. People trying to start the co-op.
They worry too much about their employees rather than the interests of the person who owns the private property. That's the idea.
Yeah,
but if that's the case, then why should a banker give a loan to a co-op if they're not going to pay him back?
They are going to pay them back, but they
then
do
there's
have
a profit
interests
for
that
whoever
pertain to their people rather than the interests of the person who owns the private property, who will in turn, of course, pay the workers a little bit of what they earned.
But the point is, regardless of how their structure is, if he's going to be paid back with interest, then he has an incentive to loan to them. That's the only incentive you need in a free market.
Well, going and sorry, I lost my train of thought here. What was I?
I just want to say I'm sorry if anyone's frustrated. I hope everyone's having a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I'm having a blast.
I remember what I was.
I think we need to
it's
tone
like,
it down a bit. I am getting a little bit heated myself, and I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just saying the thing with co-ops is, I mean, I think my little problem you had when you were arguing with the co-op was that, you kept saying, they were going to pay it back, which is good and noble, but at the end of the day, we need to have proof, I mean, we can't just say you're going to pay it back, we need to say, okay, what's your plan? How are you going to make the money and, the resources back, and how are you going to pay us back, and what's the time? Because if I just give you like a loan for like $2,000 and I ask you when am I going to get paid back, and you said, oh, don't worry, I'll pay you back, I'm thinking, okay, something tells me I'm not going to see that $2,000 come back.
Well, and what more
I don't
question
really
you have to
understand
answer
why this
is,
argument of paying back the bank is the question. It's like saying because wealth is centralized around a private property owner within capitalism, that somehow the money won't get back to the bank. And it's the same for cooperatives. Just because they're paying their workers does not mean that they're going to invest within the company itself. It's just that investing within the company will be among the workers rather than
let me ask you this.
Up to the person with the private property.
Let me ask you this. A bank loans money to a co-op. They end up not paying it back like they're supposed to. What should happen?
The bank will seize the co-op because it's in a private property system.
Okay, so
he's asking what should happen. Like no, wait, something isn't. He's asking what not necessarily what you think would happen in a capitalist system, but what you think ought to happen.
In a capitalist system? Well, I think you got people we wouldn't want to have a capitalist system to begin with.
Period. Not strictly in a capitalist system. He's asking what you think ought to happen in that scenario.
In a socialist system?
Yeah.
denying money to them because they are obviously reliant on the money and they're not going to get it. But no. But my scenario is the banker has loaned them the money and they haven't paid it back. So how is the banker going to try and reclaim at least some of what he's lost?
Well, I'm not entirely familiar with the ideas of mutualism within this sense, but I think the general idea is that one, they'll stop loaning them, or two, they'll hire some sort of like security.
Actually, yeah, I should get Tanner off.
Because again, within the system, private property laws are abolished.
You
wouldn't have to worry about infringing on another's property.
We should actually get Tanner on here sometime because he has a great background in mutualism too.
Oh, no, he doesn't. Tanner's bad.
He's recently mutualist, right?
Here's something
What is the distinction between personal property and private property? You believe that there should be a personal property concept, right?
Yeah, personal and cooperative properties are not coerced by law. You don't have a system in which somebody can, again, extract the surplus value of another within this system.
Well,
there is no surplus value because value is subjective.
The conceptualization of it is, in fact, it's not debunked because you sell your labor to another. You're still selling a chunk of what you produce.
Well, what is the distinction between personal and private property? The personal property which should be allowed and the private property which shouldn't?
I just stated personal and cooperative properties are not coerced by law, and they don't allow you to extract the surplus value of another.
So does your home count as personal property?
Does a home count as personal property?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so will you use law to make sure no one else goes inside that home besides yourself?
I think when I say law, I don't mean like law. I mean specifically laws pertaining to private property ownership.
Would you not use force to extract someone from your home?
Don't care about your home. We don't care about your toothbrush.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, would you
private property
extract someone from your home?
Is purely from the perspective of land in which surplus value is derived among multiple people. In fact, if you have a family-owned farm and
there is no surplus value.
Nobody else lives on it except for you.
Wait, could you let
then we don't even care about seizing it. Because the idea is you're not exploiting somebody else's labor.
Hey, could you sorry.
It's
Others were trying to speak, and I want to make sure everyone gets a shot.
But you were saying that you do not have to use law in order to enforce, say, your personal or cooperative property, correct?
Well, the idea is that you don't have a law in place that will allow you to extract surplus value another, like you do in capitalism. There can still be small laws among, I mean, it depends on what kind of society you'd be looking at, like a confederation. But let's say, for instance, this confederation will have laws so that a certain neighborhood will have protection. Or
let's look at the scenario.
So basically there would be a state.
There would be a state. What's the difference between a state and a government to you guys?
Pretty much synonymous.
See, that's where anarchists and, hell, even Marxists for that matter, would disagree. Because a government is just a system in which people can cooperate and governance themselves, while a state is a system in place that can lead to class structures and marginalization of groups.
Okay, so by your definition, UL is a government, ISO is a government, the IETF is a government.
Within today's system, we have state governments, or I don't know how to put it. These
things aren't states. They don't have powers of law, but they do things like
governments that are in place enforce a marginalization through the use of private property, and in the past, much more how do you put it? Much more clear laws pertaining to race, gender, sex, etc.
But let me go ahead into the scenario I'm thinking of. So, if you said that I can have a house, I guess I can also have a hammer if I need to make repairs to my house, right?
Yeah.
So that would be fine. What if I have a hammer, my neighbor doesn't, and I say, well, I'll come and make these repairs for, in exchange for you mowing my lawn or something. Can I do that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand what you're getting at here, because you're not employing
now
somebody.
I've taken the hammer from a tool of personal property, and now the hammer is a tool of the means of production. It's now capital.
Yeah, but I just outlined the whole idea of the family farm, in which, since you're not technically exploiting somebody else's surplus value through the use of private property, then you're not really how do you put it, exploiting anybody.
You're not exploiting anybody because it's voluntary. And same with the business.
Well, the idea is that this exploitation, again, is derived from surplus value. It doesn't have to be like direct violence or aggression, because this ultimately has much further causes, and it is coerced.
See, the issue is, as soon as you say that I'm allowed to go and, fix my neighbor's house in exchange for something else of value, then all of a sudden I'm now allowed to, hire someone else. Hey, take my hammer, go over, fix my neighbor's house, and then my neighbor will pay me some from that, and then I'll pay the worker. And I mean, we've just gone from, in a complete smooth gradation from, a completely okay scenario, according to you, to something that, most socialists and communists would say is exploitative.
I'm sorry, can you re-explain it? Because I'm just going to argue from market socialism at this point.
Okay, so I started out with a hammer. Mm-hmm. I've got a hammer. I can repair my house. My neighbor needs to repair his house. He doesn't have a hammer. Or if he did, he wouldn't know how to use it, or doesn't have the ability, or something like that. He's an old man or something, whatever. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to fix his house, and he's going to pay me to do it, or do something else for me, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, step 3, I've got my neighbor on the other side. I'm like, hey, I've got this hammer. Go and, fix my other neighbor's house. Then the neighbor pays me some, and I'll pay you some of what he pays me. So just in a couple of steps, we've gone from this system of personal property to a system of private property and exploitation of my other neighbor.
Well, no, there's also several other causes that take factor into this. without the with the abolishment of private property in the social organization of labor, or socialist organization of labor, people still can have directors of sorts. I mean, the idea is that because there is no system in place that allows somebody to specifically own private property,
No,
that
what he's showing is that personal
excuse
property
me,
became
because I'd
private.
like to defend the
Yes,
thought.
personal property has become private.
there's
So in
still
this situation,
people
where
who can be
Hold
in
on.
charge of certain groups, as long as their rule is through like liquid democracy. That's the idea.
in this situation where my neighbor is going to take my hammer and fix my other neighbor's house, my other neighbor is going to pay me for it, and then I'm going to pay the first neighbor's sum of that. Have I not set up this whole, surplus value of labor scenario thing you were talking about earlier that you were complaining about?
Basically, what Shane is asking is like, in your idea, is it just for a democratic collective to maybe vote to dictate the use of Shane's hammer in this scenario?
Well, I mean, you don't own the hammer per se. It's only the ownership is only coming about through possession. So, I mean, you're letting him borrow it. It's not your hammer, and he doesn't have to owe you anything.
Really my property. So you don't believe in
It's not your property. You lose it. Read Sterner. But the idea is that possession is what ultimately goes around, like what property is, not ethical practices of capitalism. But the idea is that if he'll pay you back because he feels obligated to do so. He doesn't have to.
Now you're invoking Sterner a lot. I am familiar enough to realize you're talking about egoism in that particular sense. Motivation
I'm
by
specifically referring to Max Sterner doesn't specifically tell you to do things. He just lays down systems, or not a system. He lays down an analysis which goes against ethical practice.
Well, I mean,
I feel like I really need to get a yes or no on this. This whole system with my hammer and the two neighbors.
Yes, it's good because I just stated why it does not take grounds into private property or obligation through coercion. It's
so my
obligation
first neighbor,
through choice.
So my first neighbor, when I'm letting use the hammer, is not being exploited in that scenario. Correct?
No. How would they be exploited through this? Is my question.
Well, I mean, what is the difference between that and, say, Microsoft hiring programmers?
Microsoft hiring programmers. So Microsoft, or the head of Microsoft, owns the land in which the programmers are working on, and will thus subject them to wage labor. Are you familiar with the idea of wage labor?
Wait. Haven't I just done that, though, with my first neighbor? I'm saying, do this, fix my other neighbor's house.
Well, to me, it sounded like you were loaning him. You were letting him rent.
No, he was using my hammer.
And then you were paying him after he loaned it to another person.
No. I loaned him my hammer so he could go and fix my other neighbor's house. The other neighbor paid me, and then I paid him some, and then he gave me the hammer back.
See, this is all confusing. Can you explain it in terms of property?
Okay. I have a house that's my property. My first neighbor, presumably has a house or something. And then my second neighbor has a house that needs fixing. And I have a hammer, and I'm the only one of us that has a hammer. And so my neighbor is saying, well, you have a hammer. I'll pay you, just to get some numbers in, $100 to fix my house. And I'm like, well, gee, I like the $100, but I don't really want to do the work. I go over to my other neighbor and say, hey, if I let you use my hammer, would you go over and fix my other neighbor's house for $80? And he says, sure. He goes over and does it. The neighbor pays me the 100, and I pay him the 80 and keep 20.
Again, I don't understand how you're linking this to private property, because this loan is not through the law of private property.
There's not a loan.
Well,
you're loaning him the hammer.
He is using my hammer as capital.
He's using the hammer as capital, and
he's using the hammer as a means of production, but you're loaning it to him, and you're not being coerced to do it by the law of private property.
Wait,
Like,
what?
you don't have a government or a state in this place to force you to force him to give back the hammer to you, or you don't have a thing that forces him to give you the profit from that labor.
Well, I mean, I would argue that if we make an agreement, we're entitled to have that. We're entitled to either enforce that agreement ourselves or.
I mean, I should be able to enforce somehow
I'm
getting
not
my hammer
disagreeing
back
with
from
you
him
there,
if he
that
doesn't
we
want to
should
give it
enforce
back to me.
agreements.
I should be able to have some way of making sure I can get my hammer back from him, the same way that he should have some way of making sure that I actually pay him the $80 and then just decide, instead of just deciding not to do it.
Yeah, anarchy isn't just when there's no government. There can still be governments within anarchism, and there's often organizations that will form around these principles of sorts.
Well, like anarcho-capitalists talk about like a DDRO or something like that. So if there's a dispute, there is this third party that we can go to. But the point is, you know, he finishes working on the house, he gives me my hammer back, I give him the $80.
The point is that the party is mutually agreed upon beforehand, correct?
Right.
It's all voluntary.
Also,
yeah,
and yet there is no distinction whatsoever between this and the exploitative surplus labor scenario.
Whose phone?
Well, what were you saying?
Well, can I say something real quickly? And going back to the personal property, you know, I mean, if you know, a lot of socialists do like to take on this role. Well, nobody really truly owns anything. So my personal question is, well, what happens if, like, let's say some neighbor, you know, another one of Shane's neighbor, you know, he doesn't have a hammer, but he wants to work on this project, and he sees one of Shane's hammers on there, and he decides, you know what, I think I'll take that hammer for just for now, and I'll give it back later, I promise, you know, and he takes it, but Shane might have needed it. Well, don't you think, you know, that's, you know, I mean, a lot of people would say, well, yeah, that's stealing, but if Shane technically doesn't own it, you know, and that guy doesn't own it, then what permits, you know, who can use the hammer and at what time, you know?
As I outlined earlier, ownership is derived by possession and not third ethical standards of this sorts. You don't have an ethics in place that says, I am entitled to this. It's purely through material dispute, which is, I have this hammer, therefore I am in possession and I have the ability to manipulate it.
So does that
legalize
stuff
get
then?
back to the topic, which is, who is obligated to this object? Well, nobody is obligated to this object. What really is in place is a government which represents like the sides in this dispute of sorts. And I think it's quite obvious that a socialist society doesn't want to invoke stealing, so to say. We just want to have we just don't want to be coerced by private property, if that makes sense.
But I mean, you're saying that personal property is good, so what should happen if someone takes my personal property?
Again, it's I just said property ownership is derived by possession.
Well, if I'm not at my house, if I'm not at my house because I've gone out on a trip or something, it's still my house, whether I'm there or not.
According to what is at your house?
According to the fact that he's put his labor into it. Let's do something a little more simple. Let's talk about a chair. Let's say I have a chair, and this chair I cut the wood from, and I finished it up, and I glued it and nailed it together and did all this, and it's my chair. And then someone else just says, oh, I need a chair. He's got one, and they just take it from me. You know, that doesn't sound right, because I've got my labor in that chair, and that's what makes it mine.
And he used it, and he then possessed it. Does that make it his?
I mean,
if he possesses it, then he, again, obviously, according to like actual material analysis, his possession is what makes it his ownership. He is the one that is able to manipulate it. Like, if I have something across the earth, and I'm obviously not able to see it, I'm not able to touch it, I'm not able to do anything with it, then how the hell am I able to manipulate it in any way?
So then how does this not legitimize stealing either if you're not in your own home and someone uses it?
I mean, there's obviously, within this society, the ideas of stealing are obviously not incentivized, because there will be systems in place in which people will obviously not want to have the things that they feel they own be stolen.
But you just said it yourself. Like if you're in another part of the world and you don't, since you can't manipulate that product or home, then therefore it's not yours. But if someone else were to manipulate your own home, apparently according to you, they own it. So how is that not stealing?
The only way that they own it is through this construction that because they are within this government, that essentially the government will protect their interests. And this interest in this place would be home ownership.
Well, no, we're talking about
government doesn't
forget about government. Forget about government. We're just talking about legitimate ownership of property.
Yeah, the thing is, I think something-ism is coming from the position that he believes that the concept of ownership itself derives from a state, which I wouldn't.
No, the concept of ownership is about protecting our stuff from the state.
I'm saying there is no ethical practice behind property, so to say. It's purely decided through material factors of possession. But people will, of course, go about property exchange and ownership from this standard, or not from this standard, but from standards of their own, and form groups in which they will defend the interests of each other in owning property. If that makes sense. Are you familiar with the Union of Egoists?
Yeah, I think we're getting off track, though. I'm really trying to pin you down on this idea of property, because you say you agree with personal property, but if anyone can just come along and take it at any time, then how is it property? What meaning is there to the term property?
And how is it not?
And I stated possession. But again, there would be groups who would form together with interests of holding these properties. We've just gone into
several reasons why that doesn't work.
Go on.
One was if you just go on vacation, if you just leave something behind, then somebody can come around and take your stuff, according to you.
Again, like I said, there would be groups in place that would cooperate among this self-interest of pertaining this property.
Well, there already are. It's property rights.
You're just saying that someone else is going to decide. And you're really not answering the question there. You're just kind of pushing.
Well, no, it's not somebody else to decide. It's a group in which you cooperate upon yourself that will decide.
But when I go to this group and I say this is my chair, and the guy who took my chair goes up to this group and says no, it's mine because I have it, who should they reward the chair to? What process, what criteria should they use to determine
Like in a commune, if you were to leave the commune, you'd still have your home and stuff. Just because private property is abolished within the sense doesn't mean that people won't respect your property. I mean, they have no obligation to do so other than through the governing bodies in place that are in place to protect one's home.
But
and the protection is guided through mutual self-interest within this respect. It's not through a hierarchical.
You're still not answering the question. You're still not answering the question of what should the criteria be for determine who owns something if there's a dispute.
And what should the criteria be?
Yeah. How do you determine who really owns something?
So you're asking who should be in charge of who owns the property?
Who should be in charge of this chair? Who should get to sit in the chair? Who should be able to decide?
The idea is that the collective, I know that word hurts a couple people, but the idea is that those within society, should run the society itself rather than individuals.
Okay, but what principle should they use to determine whose property that is? Is there a principle that they should use, or should they just arbitrarily decide?
No.
Like what the maxim is, rather than just arbitrary collective will.
I wouldn't say that there's a specific law they must guide themselves with, but rather just decisions pertaining to the abolition of private property.
But we're not talking about private property. We're talking about personal property. This is personal property, which you said was okay. This is personal property, which you said was okay, and yet we've got two people making a claim to the same piece of personal property.
Personal property, is not used to exploit another's labor. And we've already outlined this.
Right, it's a chair. We're using it to sit on. I say it's my chair. I should get to sit on it. He's taking the chair. He says he should get to sit on it.
Yes, according to material analysis, of course, it is this chair because he is whoever is using the chair. Okay, they
But
possess.
where
the
are
chair.
you?
there is no
I
personal
I think it's
property.
quite obvious
is no
that
personal
if you
property then.
manipulate an object, you are obviously in possession of it.
We would argue that the
So just
person
go home.
who made the chair is entitled to the chair, not the person who is sitting in it in any given moment.
Why are they entitled to it? What ethical
Because they
practice
put their
involved,
labor
like
into it.
Kantian
Their
ethics?
labor into it.
Yeah, they'll never build another chair if somebody
But
can
why,
just make
again,
the chair
why
from it.
am I obligated to your property rights under this
I'm
domain?
not saying you're
So how is
obligated
this
to
not-
anything. I'm
but
saying
you
I get
just-
to have my chair.
But you also said
Yeah,
it yourself,
but
like
you're
you do not
stating
legitimize
that I'm
theft. But
obligated
this
to
is
respect
theft.
your property.
By this point,
You are
by what-
obligated to-
by this point, you don't own your labor. You possess your labor, but you do not own it.
Yes.
Right. So the collective
Okay.
decides what your
I'm
labor
saying
is.
that ownership is derived by possession, and you guys are saying ownership is derived by ethics.
Yes.
So you do not own the
Yes.
fruits of your labor. Is that what you're saying?
So your entire practice kind of falls apart once we start looking at material analysis instead of ethics. Like, you understand this, right? Like again, this also ties into Western centralism or whatever you call it, where practices that might not be wanted around the world would obviously not go across the world, because this follows into an idea that everybody must follow within Western ethics.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, the idea is that you guys are tying into a specific subsect of ethical practice rather than taking into like the actual material idea of humanity.
But we're starting
And
with the
ownership of
principle of
property.
self-ownership.
But according to you, also, you do not own the fruits of your own labor, considering the fact that if you were to make this chair and then all of a sudden if someone else were to sit on it, all of a sudden they own it, even though they put no labor into it.
Which means you don't even own yourself.
So the person who made the
How
chair.
do you, wait. How do you not own yourself? Because as far as I know,
So
you're
we
always
would
in
argue
possession
that
of your own body.
We would argue that the person who made the chair is having their labor extracted from them without their consent.
Right, and the labor is something I do with myself, with my body and my time and my energy. So really, that chair ends up being a part of me. It's an extension of myself. It's something that I did. And if you can just come along and take that, then you are claiming ownership over that amount of time and effort and everything I put into making the chair.
And it makes it
yeah,
theft.
yeah.
Can I say
That's
something real quickly?
We call
Um,
it theft, and not even socialists go about enforcing or allowing this. The socialists, believe it or not, just don't want everybody to just take other people's shit. Like, we are fine with people owning things to say, as long
Yeah,
as
but you can't
this
delineate
ownership
that.
doesn't allow somebody
It seems
to
like
exploit the labor of others, if that makes sense.
No, but at the
Like-
same time, too, though, your own definition of possession legitimizes theft. Whether or not you guys agree to it, this or that, it doesn't matter.
legitimize it. It doesn't lay down an ethical practice from which this thing is legitimized. Again, I claim that there is a material basis to ownership. However, humans will come together, okay, in collectives based on mutual self-interests of holding these said properties.
hey, actually, you mind if I segue for a second? Like, say you guys wanted to do like a socialist little confederation. You would be perfectly okay with us doing like a capitalist confederation over in our.
Inside the Socialist Confederation.
Democratic confederalism.
Yes.
It's a specific section of socialist governance developed by, I believe, Murray Rothbard, and is practiced in modern day Rojava to this day. It basically, I'm not entirely familiar with the structure itself. You'd have to ask Twist or somebody, but I think the idea is that neighborhoods elect certain. They elect a representative from which they extend to the city. Which
Basically,
elects
the
a
representative would serve as a diplomat rather than having.
Wait, can I ask a question
power.
about the
Yeah,
Democratic confederalism?
it's a liquid democracy again.
Wait, you said it was like made by like Mary Rothbard or something?
No, Murray
Yes.
Bookchin.
Or
you
Bookchin,
said
my bad.
You said Rothbard.
Oh, that was bad.
I was about to say.
That was funny.
I was going
No,
to say
but no, Murray Bookchin, and it's currently being practiced in Rojava to this day, who is fighting a war on, what, 3 fronts now?
Oh, who are they fighting?
They're fighting Turkey, they're fighting ISIS, and I believe they're in a small conflict with Libya, but I'm not entirely sure on that.
Oh my god, I hate all those people they're fighting. Okay, sorry, I'm sidetracking.
I think if you're just over there, you're fighting all these people pretty much by default.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, it's the Kurdish struggle. That's all you gotta say.
Okay, I'm sorry. I am derailing a lot. I got how to do that.
It's okay, Reen. I love you.
Yeah.
Oh, Reen, did you just get
Yeah,
here?
it's me. Yeah, it's
Hey,
me.
Reen.
Yo, TNU.
Reen and Brumley have been in here a while, but Brumley's not talking.
I was trying to get a few points in, but I couldn't get any points in, so I just gave up and I just started listening.
Let's hear it, Reen.
Now, Reen, you're a PaleoCon, right?
Paleo Lib. I don't know if there's a difference.
Oh, PaleoLib. Right.
Yeah. And I'm so new to it, though.
Oh.
Still reading stuff. Or he's trying to read stuff.
Like what?
On The Law by Frederick Bastiat.
It's pretty good.
Yeah,
it's a good book, The Law by Frederick Bastiat.
Yeah, I was never good at reading, so it's not very easy.
Yeah.
I'd say it's a must read though. Get a good translation.
Yeah, Frederick Bastiat. He's the guy that basically coined, the broken window fallacy and all that too, right?
And he also wrote the Candlemaker's Petition.
Oh yeah, I love the Candlemaker's Petition. That's another thing that I think a lot of people need to read, especially like when they were just talking like with anarcho-somethingism talked about with like when they're talking about cooperationship and how that occurs in capitalist system. They should read the essay I Pencil.
Well, and the Candlemaker's Petition is also a good thing to point out to someone when they talk about capitalism being this system where, government is picking winners and losers and stuff like that, which we would call mercantilism, because that's exactly what that's going against is mercantilism and protectionism.
Yeah. For those
Again,
not, for those not.
I want to say we're not saying government chooses winners and losers within a market economy. The idea is that the government or the state legitimizes property ownership and thus the ability to extract surplus value.
Well,
which we've gone over.
I just want to say something just for the people who don't know. I'm pretty sure most of us know it, but for the people in the chat who don't know, to paraphrase it, the Candlemaker's Diary is basically where the candlemakers, are complaining that the sun is unfair because the sun's always there, and they're afraid that if it's shining too much, that people won't use their candles. So they petitioned the government to ban all houses with windows and open rooftops and all that, and demand that everyone has to stay inside in a dark room, basically.
Yeah, so they can use the candles and the lamps and everything else, and they won't lose business.
Yeah. It's basically
okay.
That's what
How does this tie into socialism?
That's
My favorite part is where he blames the sun on pernicious Albion. I love that part.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was sorry, somethingism. That was kind of a segue.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got off of what you were talking.
With Bastiat.
I love the broken window fallacy. I still, Shane, I cannot tell you how many times I still see people support the broken window fallacy.
No, absolutely. It never stops.
there was actually a My Little Pony episode I saw one time that everyone seems to love, but I really hate it because in the episode there's like these bats that are eating the apples to the apple tree, and the argument for why you got to keep them alive is because Fluttershy's like, yeah, but they don't eat the seeds, and you can just grow the seeds back. And I'm like, Fluttershy, if they have to replant the seeds, they need water to replant the seeds. They have to put all this time and resource to planting new apple trees.
No, I'm very familiar with that episode, actually. So
yeah, there was something like that in an episode of Animaniacs as well, where I think Wacko had a hay penny, and the whole point of the episode is what's he going to spend it on, and everyone's poor. And then I forget what, but he just to buy something with a hay penny, and then that person buys something else, that person buys something else, and then all of a sudden they're all wealthy instead of inflation, which is what would really happen.
Yeah,
it's nowhere near as bad as the Flim Flam Brothers introductory episode.
Yeah, I hate that episode. I actually posted a sarcastic comment in one scene where the ending was, "Dear Princess Celestia, I was right all along." I basically said, "Yeah, don't trust entrepreneurs."
Because throughout in the beginning of the episode, the Flim Flam brothers did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
The apples had no obligation to accept the deal. You know?
Yeah, that was the that was the whole problem with the episode was the apples were so stubborn. You know, I mean, they easily could have avoided the situation by telling Flim Flam brothers, no, thank you, we're not doing business with you. But no, they're like, hey, you can't tell us what we can and can't do. We'll show you. It's like you're digging your own grave, people.
Yeah. Oh, Shane, have you ever seen My Little Pony?
I haven't really sat down and watched it. No, I mean, I heard good things about the reboot, but I haven't really known.
You have children.
No, I've actually seen.
I have children that don't watch My Little Pony. I don't know what to tell you.
I bet they watch Doctor Who though. I bet you're so proud.
Oh yeah.
yeah. Shane, did you say your son really loves Doctor Who?
My son and my daughter. My daughter's really jazzed about getting a female doctor.
Oh, Chris, have you? Did you go see Equestria Girls in theaters?
No, I haven't.
Okay, yeah, you get a lot of weird looks. Just saying. Like,
yeah,
I never had a chance to. I am excited about the upcoming movie, though.
Yeah.
Other than
the movie.
By the way, on the subject of Equestria Girls, have you guys seen? Has anyone watched the Magical Movie Night specials?
No.
No.
Oh, they are so good, especially part 2, which is a really well put together whodunit.
I mean, after like season 4 of the Fruit Bat episode, I just like stopped.
Yeah, but yeah, that episode was so terrible, you know, and it's like, yeah, not to mention, you know, but you know, it goes back, it just baffles me why so many people still think the broken window fallacy is so, you know, works, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, when you see, you know, I mean, it's just funny how how Paul Krugman is still well respected by a lot of, you know, college economics, when this is a guy who, when we see a picture of like Haiti being devastated by an earthquake or Japan being destroyed by a typhoon, we think, oh my God, those poor people, I hope they'll be able to go back with their lives. Paul Krugman says, yay, look at all the construction job opportunities now.
I cannot even think of one accurate prediction that man has made.
Yeah, I know.
Call it hurricane stimulus from now on.
One actually predict was the economic crisis due to the Treaty of Versailles.
Well, the thing with the Treaty of Versailles is that, you know, I mean, a lot of people like to pretend that nobody saw World War II coming, but they knew. If you read the personal diaries of a lot of the politicians and generals,
really obvious.
They said, there was one famous French general who flat out said the Treaty of Versailles is not a peace treaty; it's just a 20-year ceasefire.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like, you know, really, you know, the whole thing with World War II, you know, I mean, history likes to portray World War II as being unpredictable, but I think the more accurate term is that we all saw World War II coming, but everyone was just in denial about it, you know. You know, they basically were just plugging their ears and saying, Hitler's not there, Hitler's not there, Hitler's not there. Oh, he just conquered Paris, he's there.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, lad.
Yeah.
Oh, don't get us started on...
Charlie Chaplin tried to warn us.
Don't get us started on the Holocaust revisionists.
Oh, man.
Oh, God.
I actually seen a little bit of the dictator.
The moment Hitler stepped into Belgium, his campaign was over.
I don't know. The Nazi Germany was never going to last. It was. Everyone says, "Oh, they ran this highly efficient machine." They didn't.
Wait.
Didn't. It was collapsing.
Who did Hitler invade first?
There's this weird trope that authority.
I mean, Hitler's economic regulation, or not regulations, but reformations were very successful at first. But of course, they had extreme economic like downfalls towards like the later stages of his reign. I suppose
that's the difference between short run and long run. I mean, it's easy to make things look good in the short run, but in the long run, it's going to catch up to you.
In the long run, we're all dead fans.
Wealth from all the countries that they invaded, so it looks really good in Germany.
I'm back, sorry.
Starting up an Eastern Front was a great idea too.
But I mean, this is an idea that's gone way back. I don't even know how far. It's like, okay, we've got a problem. Well, let's conquer a neighboring country, and then we get all of the tax money from the people there. And now we have another problem, so we need to conquer another one and then another one, because you're not actually, you know, your expenses have gone up as well, and you're not really doing anything to fix the problems that exist. You're just trying to get money from somewhere else to pay for it. But
if someone,
I think the idea of invading Russia was also for farmland. But that failed miserably.
Lebensraum, that's what the term was.
Who did?
Here's another myth about the Nazi. Here's another myth about the Nazis that we see in a lot of video games and movies and TV shows, is that the Nazis wanted to control the entire world. In real life, they only wanted most of Europe, bits of Russia, and parts of North Africa. That's all they wanted.
Yeah, but then they want more after they get that.
Yeah, I mean,
but
this expansion would keep going.
Yeah,
but
like,
that was their first plans. Yeah.
So Shane, I just have to ask. This is completely a change in topic, but have you seen Thunderfoot's latest video about the Hyperloop?
I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it yet. At some point, I'm going to sit down and, as I watch it, take a whole bunch of notes and share it with libertarianists so we can start working on a response to it.
It's really bad. I don't know if a response is even necessary. I mean, he rehashed.
What little I've seen of it, it's just rehashing all the same wrong stuff again. But we'll see when I get down into the nuts and bolts of it.
I'm glad we're all united.
It's probably enough to make. It's probably enough to make Lord Killian's skin crawl if he had me.
Oh yeah, I was wondering. Do you think you'll do this time with Lord Killian?
No, this will be another collab with libertarianists. So I'll just make it like the rest of the series and just put it at the end of the playlist.
How do you guys find out about libertarianism, to be exact?
What?
How do
For
you
me,
guys find
it happened like over such a long period of time, I couldn't even tell you, because I was reading science fiction and Robert Heinlein and things like that when I was a kid, and so I was always kind of being exposed to it.
Speaking of Robert Heinlein, everyone seems to think that Starship Troopers is promoting fascism, even though it clearly isn't, you know?
Yeah, it's saying this is how you don't want to do things.
Yeah, you know, that's why I hate the Starship Troopers movie, because, you know, it's like, the guy who directed that movie, he even admitted that he didn't read the book. He only read like the first chapter. That he's like, you know what? I hate this book. I'm just gonna make whatever the hell I want. And I hate it when directors do that. You know?
Oh my god! Seriously, why would anyone do that?
There's this thing where people suggest. I heard this suggestion about a job that needs to exist. It's basically someone called a book slapper. It's someone on set whose job it is to read the book. And every time the director says, well, the book says this, but what if he slaps him with the book?
Well, to be fair though, books and movies are two different mediums. You know, I mean, it's
there are some things that are gonna work in a book that won't work in a movie, and vice versa.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like to hate on the Harry Potter movies for cutting out things from the book, but when you really look at it, if like you were to read the entire Harry Potter books from front to end, they would be like, if you were to take it and make it literally into a movie page for page, it'd be a really boring movie.
You'd have to do it like Game of Thrones. You'd have to make it like, you know, a 10-hour series every year instead of trying to cram it all into 2.5 hours.
Movies are really bad at adapting long-form narratives.
Yeah.
But now that we can do things like that with Game of Thrones and The Handmaid's Tale, which I thought was excellent, by the way, and other things like that. I mean, you know, we just got finished watching season 1 of American Gods, which is just incredibly good.
And even movies are managing to do it by breaking themselves up into parts now. So.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people hate that, but I like it. I think it's a good trend.
So
Yeah, but I really think you still have the same issues, and when you can have 10 hours of story a year with, you know, Game of Thrones or whatever, as opposed to like a movie which will give you 2 or 3 hours every 3 or 4 years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The show I recently really enjoyed was Dexter. Dexter was really good.
That's good. We love that one.
Although there was, I think about, I want to say season 3 or 4. Again, I haven't seen it in a while, but it got really boring because he basically just spent the entire time trying to go after like one person and like not really doing anything else.
Is it weird that the first thing I think of when I hear the name Dexter is not serial killer detective, but boy genius?
Yeah,
Dexter's Lab.
I get that a lot when I try to recommend
Okay,
show.
yeah.
And
actually going back to the whole, you know, how, you know, TV serials are doing it better now, you know, I think that's also the reason why Hollywood's the biggest pushers of copyright laws, because they know their time is coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Industry is probably going to be largely obsolete. Like, it'll still be there, but everyone's going to go to things like internet or Hulu or Netflix and all that. I mean, they're already
It's just
going to
be about who can tell the story the best.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the whole reason why we have copyright laws. You know, it's not to protect, you know, the creators. It's just to make sure that, you know, whoever, you know, holds the copyright stays in power.
I mean, there's some Harry Potter fanfic out there. I've talked about some of it that's just so much better, I think, than what J.K. Rowling. I mean, as much as I enjoy what she wrote, there's some just incredibly good fanfic out there.
And it's very funny because going back to this, Daniel, that's, you know, copyright is the large reason why I think why Disney, you know, messed up Star Wars so much is because they hold the copyright now, so they can do whatever the hell they want with it, you know, because a piece of paper said so. Where there's a lot of good, you know, short fan films, you know, based on the original expanded universe, but because Disney owns the copyright, if you were to release it on like YouTube, they can go and say, you can't do that, we own that. So
yeah, I can't figure out how that happens, because there was that court case over The Wind Done Gone, which, if you've never heard of that, someone else wrote a version of Gone with the Wind from the point of view of the slaves. They were sued by the estate of Margaret Mitchell, and they lost. They said, no, they can write a new, you know, because it was new dialogue and everything in the same universe, but they could do that.
Yeah, that's another thing I never get about copyright. Like, you know, I guess one could make an argument for if the person's alive, but if the person's been dead for centuries, what's the point?
Oh, I was reading on that something like it was one of those websites like Fee or somewhere like that, where they were saying, you know, okay, well, you know, so and so back in, I think it was Arthur Conan Doyle wrote Sherlock Holmes. Oh, well, he probably would have written more Sherlock Holmes books knowing he had the copyright for 70 years after his death as opposed to 50 years. You know, just pointing out how absurd it was.
Yeah, I'm actually going to make fun of that in the comic strip I'm working on, where a guy's trying to make a Disney fan, you know, he's trying to make a fanfic of some Disney movies, you know, just reimaginings, and Disney comes up and sues them and says, well, what gives you the rights? What gives you the rights, you know, to me to tell a version of a story that's been told for centuries? And Disney says this little piece of paper. And basically it says Disney owns the trade right to this, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When most of their intellectual property, so to speak, is about that, taking older stories and
Gaming Wildlife did the best. You know, what if Disney was 100% honest with us? And they said, now look, we know that we can't, you know, we can't copyright some stories like Sleeping Beauty, but we're going to make sure that our version is the only version you know about.
Yeah, copyright laws are whack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was telling you this out in the comments a few days ago. I think it was like when Shakespeare was writing his plays, there was no copyright protection for it, which meant he had to keep cranking out, because if Kit Marlowe can come around and do his own version of it, you know, a few months from now, you know.
Recent TV used an example with Giuseppe Verdi, you know, a really well-respected, you know, opera writer. You know, I mean, he was cranking out great music over and over again, and the reason was because Italy had a very, very lax copyright law, and he knew that if I don't keep producing good quality work, some a-hole's going to around, you know, twist, you know, the chords around, and he's going to claim it's his own.
Same in Germany, and that's why Beethoven and Mozart and people like that were just cranking them out.
Mozart's Austrian, by the way.
But it was the same kind of thing. There was no copyright protection.
Yeah. You know, versus, you know, one of the reasons why we don't hear a lot of English composers is because England is notorious for being, you know, the origin of the whole big copyright and patent thing.
And actually, back when it was established, it was meant as a form of government censorship.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. You know, all these, you know, small time, you know, printers, you know.
There's a good YouTube video from Copy Me that goes into it, and the origin of how it all started.
From who?
Hello, did someone say something?
From who now? I've been looking all over for that video.
I'm curious, though. Where's Travis Retriever?
He hasn't been around much lately.
I haven't seen him in any of your comments recently, so I was like, oh.
Yeah.
We had to put him down.
Occasionally I'll get a PM from him and we'll have a little conversation, but I don't know what he's up to.
By the way, guys, sorry if I'm being a little bit like this. It's just my mom and her boyfriend are here, and they're always thinking I'm talking too loud.
Yeah.
All right, another topic, I guess. Anyone got one?
Anyone?
I should have written some down. I can't think of anything.
I'm probably gonna head out.
Oh wait.
It was cool talking.
All right,
Yeah, thanks for
see
the
ya.
conversation. I love that, man.
That was awesome.
Yeah, sorry if it got a bit too heated. I'm sorry about that.
You know,
It's fine. I got no problem with eating.
Yeah, I'm glad you showed up. It's good to hear from you, man. Thanks.
Yeah, if you guys want to join our Discord, TNU's got the link. But yeah, it was fun.
Union Socialist is mine, by the way.
Oh yeah, Union Socialist.
No, but okay. So I was wondering, in that last video that you made, Shane, on Dennis Prager, you brought up Euthyphro's dilemma, right?
Yep.
So I was wondering if that could somehow tie in with also atheism and libertarianism, like, or you may have already done a video on it. Basically, is murder wrong because the state says it's wrong, or is murder wrong because it's wrong? You know.
If I haven't done that one, there's a directory for doing it sometime in the future. I'd have to check.
I'm pretty sure you have.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like you have.
It wasn't exactly murder per se. It was more of something is moral because God or the state says so, whereas something is moral because it's just human nature, you know.
Or like,
yeah, I've actually heard that before. Somebody say murder is wrong because it's against the law.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Or like,
And the rights we have them because government says that's what we have, and it's like I don't think you get the idea of why rights exist.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing that I find so funny. You know, I mean, a lot of people love to say, well, you can't be an anarchist, you know, and support, you know, freedom of speech because the freedom of speech is written by the Constitution, and that gives it to you. And I'm like, no, the Constitution gives us nothing. The First Amendment does not say you have freedom of speech. It says your freedom of speech shall not be infringed. Basically, meaning the government can't infringe it.
The whole point of rights is to stop government from doing things to you. So, you know, if you can say the government can say what rights you have and what rights you don't, and they're the ones
that defeats the purpose. That defeats the purpose. And that's another thing that also a lot of people get confused over is like if they're holding a protest like in a privately owned, you know, area, and then the guy says, "Look, you're disturbing my customers. We need you to leave." They're like, "Yeah, you're oppressing my freedom of speech." No, people, it only applies to the government.
Yeah, one thing I commonly hear is illegal immigrants don't have any constitutional rights. They don't have those rights, and it doesn't work that way.
The Constitution is very clear about when it uses the words like the rights of the people or whatever, and the rights of the citizen. It says rights of the citizen with the right to vote and things like that. So you have to be a citizen to have that right because that's a political right.
Right.
But any other rights like freedom of speech, the right to keep and bear arms, everyone has those.
The people.
And Shane, one video I really like that you did was your old constitutional videos, which was the whole nationalism versus federalism, because in school we're always taught that there was the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, but like you said, when you actually look at what they were saying, everyone was a Federalist. The only difference was that some people wanted, you know, a more, you know, micro government, you know, that would still protect the nation, you know, and enforce the rule of law. But other than that, it wouldn't do anything. Whereas there was others like Alexander Hamilton who wanted a really powerful, strong central government.
Yeah, that was a good series, by the way. I really shared that a lot. That was
Oddly enough, it was kind of like by proxy that my U.S. history teacher turned me on to libertarianism when she started teaching about Jefferson and, you know, the Anti-Federalists and all that.
I cannot tell you how many people there are that try to twist Jefferson to make him appear to be a socialist.
And it's like, and I listened to all these lectures, to all these lectures back in high school, and I'm like, okay, so why are our parties not divided along these lines, which actually make some degree of sense, but instead you have Republicans and Democrats who are all over the place.
Right.
Yeah, I remember in high school, I was taught by my AP US history teacher that basically Hoover was a laissez-faire president. So,
we're all taught that. We're all taught that.
Yeah.
You know, that actually doesn't even pass the smell test. You know, when his political speech was the thing he ran on, his motto was "a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage." Does that sound like a libertarian capitalist or a guy who wants to redistribute everything?
Just look at FDR's campaign against him. He was like, "Oh, hey, free markets are great. Free markets work. That Hoover guy is doing all this socialist crap, and we need to do free markets."
Didn't FDR say that he would lower taxes or something like that? Because that's what I heard that Ayn Rand was supposed to. That's why Ayn Rand voted for him. So,
boy, did she learn. Or maybe she didn't. I don't know. She was kind of obstinate.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. That's the thing with Ayn Rand. You know, she was all over the place. You know.
I mean, yeah, because at one point she did say like basically taxes were theft, but then later in life she basically became like a minarchist. So.
Yeah,
Well, and she was also saying stuff like, you know, go to war with other races and kill them all, that sort of thing.
yeah.
I mean, I still, you know, like Atlas Shrugged, but, you know, I don't like go to Rand for understanding capitalism.
Yeah. I'm mixed on objectivism because, like I said, I do love their economic policies and they're perfectly correct. You know, when they advocate for limited government and all that, the problem is that they're out to lunch with their social policies.
Yeah.
I mean,
because
I don't know what social policies do they advocate, really.
well, basically, you know, they still believe in, you know, free market capitalism, but they also believe that, you know, capitalists should be aggressive, you know, in fighting, you know, anti-capitalists, you know, whereas libertarians are more we should lead by example, you know. I mean, while our capitalist, you know, business is booming and flourishing, you know, the socialist utopia is stagnating, you know, like with the Soviet Union, you know.
Think about when Hoppe said things like, well, you know, socialists should be denied free speech, and if you have a libertarian society and you have socialists, you should forcibly run them out and things like that.
Yeah,
that's BS.
Yeah, I don't understand the appeal of Hoppe.
Yeah, that's.
I really don't.
Yeah, that's
he said some good things, but you know.
I know Caesar's into Hoppe, but
yeah, he had a great analysis of Marx in his essay. That was a really good analysis of him. He included also even earlier about the time preference of workers. Like, you know, you open a chest filled with $10,000 now will be worth more than opening up that same chest 5 years later. You know, just the time preference of workers. You know, that's how it basically comes down to.
Yeah, you know, it's.
Well, he didn't make that, but, you know, it was Bombavert, but he.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, I understand, you know, you don't want to do an ad hominem and attack the person as a character, but I really don't understand why people look to Marx as a legitimate philosopher, because if you actually read, like, the real history about that guy, he
was a spoiled rich brat who didn't want to work.
Yeah, that's what he was. He wasn't even a philosopher. He never studied economics. He never studied philosophy. He was a flunky lawyer. Yeah, the only economics, you know, he ever learned was hanging out with the Hegelian movement, but that was it.
One thing I notice a lot from communists now that kind of take after Marx, they don't have this whole new socialist man thing anymore. Like that's been, I guess, thoroughly debunked even for them.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like with Marx, what he was trying to save socialism from was like these original utopian socialists like Fourier, and basically just trying to make it scientific. But at the end, it still seemed very utopian.
Yeah, but I can understand, like, if you think that human beings are like a tabula rasa, you know, and you can retrain them to make the kind of society you want, then his point of view makes sense. But what they do now is you don't need a new socialist man. Just people will work, people will clean up Grand Central Station just because they're tired of playing video games and being fed grapes all day.
Yeah,
in their socialist utopia. It's like,
you know, and
people want to clean a sewer pump covered in human waste one day, just because,
on a whim.
Yeah,
you know, and again, and it's pretty funny about, you know, socialism, because I mean, some people like to claim that Marx, you know, was a revolutionary, and like he was the first to think about it. No, the ideas of communism can be traced all the way back to ancient Greece. You know.
Yeah.
It
was just a repackaging of all the old stuff, you know.
Yeah, he was just the one to popularize it. I mean, you know, it's
the thing is also too, he wasn't even like really, like, while he was alive, he wasn't very popular either. Like,
he was harshly criticized by fellow socialists. You know, I believe there was one socialist, you know, who called Marx, you know, utopian, unprofessional, and basically saying, you know, look, he's got good intentions, but he has no knowledge on the subject, and he's just saying stuff that sounds pretty, but practically speaking doesn't make sense.
I'd like to see somebody go through a lot of Marx's work and take a note of all his predictions for the future, because he made a lot of predictions that were really, really off.
Well, yeah, especially
I'm just going to point those out and explain.
Yeah,
especially in regards to like the Soviet Union and Lenin's vanguard. Like, it was supposed to happen like after, like, say, capitalism failed, and the increasing misery of the proletariat. And the whole thing is supposed to come from within them.
Yeah.
But even Marx himself and, you know, all the other socialists, like, enforce it on them, you know? Like, socialism seems to be like, it'll never be a voluntary ideology. You have to have someone force it on.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that's the thing. There's actually this really good essay where some people were discussing, you know, socialism, you know, and a lot of people love to pull, again, the whole no true Scotsman fallacy by saying, well, the Soviet Union wasn't real communism because eventually, you know, a state was formed and they started, you know, controlling everything. And I like how there was one guy who said, yeah, but how did it get to that scenario?
No, they say that there needs to be a totalitarian state to set up all the infrastructure and to re-educate the population.
Yeah,
and then that totalitarian state will just voluntarily dissolve itself, and then everything will
they'll just relinquish all their power. They don't.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, and you know, it's pretty funny because the thing that makes me laugh the most is when people say, well, Lenin was a legitimately good guy, but then Stalin came and fucked it up, and I'm like, you really need to study what Lenin did and what he practiced, you know.
I think Eastern Border, he's a YouTube channel, and he has some history on Lenin for sure.
Yeah, you know, Lenin was not. I mean, he was a charismatic talker, no doubt, but he was not a friendly guy personal wise, you know.
I think that's just the communists though who want to force everything. The anarcho-syndicalists think that like worker unions can accomplish the same thing. Which I don't.
Yeah, you know,
worker unions
you still have the problem. You still have the problem with the first two people who go somewhere else and decide they're going to do things the capitalist way, and they start being a lot better, and people decide they want in on it, and they're just going to do a mass exodus over there.
Believe it or not, there actually was a commune that I forgot where it was. I believe it was in Ukraine, but there was actually a commune, and it started out, you know, as, you know, a pure communist commune where everyone owned everything. But it got shut down, you know, like 5 years later by the Soviets. And you want to know why? Because as the commune failed, they slowly began adopting more and more market policies, and eventually it was becoming a capitalist commune, and the Soviets didn't want people to know about that.
Or even, is everyone here familiar with the YouTube channel Vox?
Yeah.
Yeah. They even had a video, oddly enough, and I don't like Vox, you know, especially on the gun control thing, but they had a video on, like...
I think I've done a couple of theirs.
Yeah. Like, they had a video on Cuba, why cab drivers in Cuba make more than the state doctors there. And it's because they started having more like free market policies in there, like, you know, giving them licenses and stuff like that. And that way they can own their own cab businesses. And it works for them, you know. And
it's like I was pointing out in, was it the one against Wolf? Or anyway, one of those I was pointing out that, you know, if the average worker working for McDonald's like a cashier or something like that makes more than the starting pay of an emergency worker.
Yeah.
The EMT, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing that I know that a lot of, you know, leftists seem that a lot of, especially the college SJWs, seem to really have, is like they always think that if you graduate from a prestigious university for 4 years, you're automatically going to be given, you know, a 6-figure salary, but that's not true, you know.
Well, hell no, you're not going to be getting one on a gender studies degree.
Well,
yeah.
That was funny though, having been had.
Yeah.
But that's what I was like. People are always saying, "Oh, you just need a college education. It doesn't matter what it's in. Take it in basket weaving." And it's like, well, but how is it worth anything?
Yeah, how's it practical? You know, I mean, the funny thing is that, you know, college is actually very overrated in my opinion. In fact, there was actually this one philosopher who thought that it's not even a recent trend. College has always been overrated. You know, I mean,
it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, you know, I mean,
even back when I was in high school, I always hated everyone who was like, "Oh, you have to go to college. You have to go to college."
Yeah, I mean, and this philosopher, you know, even said, you know, because like he was, you know, born in the 1960s, but he even said, you know, my parents grew up in a generation where a person could easily live off of, you know, even a middle school education because that's how good it was, you know. I mean, and college was only for people who wanted to become lawyers, doctors, or politicians, you know. You know, people always question, but then how did people get stuff done back then if they didn't have the education? It's simple. They learned it from taking an apprenticeship or an internship and all that. And one of the reasons why we have more people going to college and they don't have, you know, skills is because, you know, it's quote unquote exploitive. You know, a lot of governments, you know, ban internships and apprenticeships.
I forget who it was, but
I've actually known.
It was one of those people who were like, got really successful in tech, even though he didn't graduate high school, and he was going around giving talks. And then there was one high school that, because he spoke there, they gave him an honorary high school diploma, and he said, "Great, now I can finally get out of this dead-end job."
Yeah, if I could also be anecdotal here, my aunt, like, she didn't have passed like a 6th grade education, yet eventually she ended up owning like 3 different Mexican superstores. So
Yeah, I tell this to people all the time. If you know what you're doing, I've actually told this to one of my managers at my workplace, which, by the way, I'll have to leave in about 15 minutes because I got to go to work. But he flat out said, if you know what you're doing, if you're smart and you shop around, a college dropout can die with a 6-figure salary and a nice house. You just got to know where to make sacrifices and know where to apply yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's like, because if you look at people who want, you need to, this much a year to live on, it's like, I'm not making that much, and I've got a house, I've got high-speed internet,
Right.
Average standard of
it's called budgeting, people.
This of course defeats the whole idea of wealth being a zero-sum game. The average standard of living has increased steadily, quite steadily.
Also, like, if I were making the same amount of money and I lived in New York City, it wouldn't be, because the cost of living is different. So why do you say, okay, let's put down, here's this one minimum wage, and that's what it needs to be everywhere, the same thing in, rural Mississippi, as for Manhattan, as for Alaska, as for Hawaii, as for wherever.
Right. Even counties within New York have vastly different cost of living.
You should also double down on that minimum wage, and also make sure you do like a minimum rent.
Oh yeah, rent control. Yeah,
rent control.
And like something else that gets me, it's like, oh well, you make minimum wage, and then you can't afford rent, you can't afford this, you can't afford that because you're only making like 70% of what you need or whatever. It's like, have you ever heard of a roommate?
Yeah, I know. It's like you never, you don't have a roommate.
I had 2 roommates one time, because I was just, we were splitting costs 3 ways.
So no one told you life was gonna be this way.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Shane, actually, this kind of goes back to, I think we talked about a long time ago, but it's kind of like a Christmas Carol. I haven't read the original book, but I've read the synopsis of it. And
I've heard there's a really good annotated version, the sarcastic.
Dan, can you just let me finish real quickly? But anyway, the biggest complaint I always have is that people like to portray, Ebenezer Scrooge as like a stereotypical rich CEO, like he's got a nice big mansion, it's all shiny, and he spends all his money while the poor workers go. And I'm like, if you read the synopsis, yeah, he's rich, but he lives like a pauper,
Yeah, he lives in like this tiny little shack.
Yeah, he has a bigger than normal house, but that's it. His own nephew even says, yeah, my uncle's rich, but he doesn't even spend money to make himself more comfortable. He just sits there alone,
Yeah.
Yeah, and throughout the novel, it's pretty clear that the only reason why he does all that stuff is not because he's an evil, greedy, a-hole. It's because, he's failed so much at life, and he's like, what? All I am good at is being a successful businessman, so that's just what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's just like everything stopped mattering to him. Nothing's important, so what's the point of anything?
Yeah,
Yeah, you also have things like, you can see that, the idea is that, oh, well, he's this evil person and then the ghost turned him good. No, he was turned back into the person that he used to be before he became all jaded and cynical.
Yeah, he was, in the original synopsis, it says, he used to be once a really cool person, even when he was, a rich businessman, he was pretty lively, but then after a combination of losing his fiance and then losing his partner, he just became like, what, there's no point in life, so I'm just going to live it one day as another and don't care about anything anymore. And I think that's actually in my personal opinion why the George C. Scott version is the best, because George C. Scott, Yeah, he portrayed, you know, I mean, because the thing is, you know, a lot of people like to portray Scrooge as like, yeah, what's so nilly about it? There's no point, you know. But George C. Scott, he still cracks a smile, you know, especially when he's explaining what he do to people, you know, who's saying, God bless us, everyone. He's like, I think he should be boiled in his own pudding. You know, he still cracks smiles every now and then. And you can see that he was once a loving person, and just that years of, you know, heartbreak and a tough, you know, childhood just made him that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's like even as a child, I mean, he was, and Dickens does not do a really good job of establishing why a lot of these things happen. But it's like even as a child, his parents like sent him off to some boarding school or something like that, and he lived terribly there, and he had never actually, you know, lived, you know, a real decent life.
Yeah, people fail to realize, you know, A Christmas Carol was partially a fictionalized autobiography of Dickens himself, because the thing is, Dickens, he was a good author, but he was not a very good person. Like, he was married multiple times. He abandoned, you know, some of his wives. He beat his wife and kids. And basically, A Christmas Carol was basically, he looked at himself and he said, holy crap, what have I become? You know,
Yeah.
You know, what happened to that, you know, passionate, you know, author I used to be? Now I'm just a grumpy old man. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing I hated about the Doctor Who episode that involved A Christmas Carol, because Dickens did not write A Christmas Carol because he had a revelation. He did it because that was basically him admitting, you know what, I'm a crappy, grumpy old man who isolated himself from his friends and family, and that's why I'm so miserable.
So he did have a revelation.
Yeah, just not a spiritual one.
But I mean, it was just a different angle from the Doctor Who episode, because there you had someone who had, you know, grown up abused, and I love the part where, you know, I forget what it was, but the boy says something smart or something like that, and he comes up to him and he throws up his hand to hit him, but then he stops himself, and that's when the Doctor knows, okay, there's some good. I can work with this.
What, the Shakespeare?
Yeah,
no, the Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
No, I said, what, the Shakespeare?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
There was a different episode with Shakespeare.
I will say, though,
Dickens uses what the Shakespeare instead of what the Dickens.
Yeah. I will say my favorite part about the George C. Scott version of the Christmas Carol has to be, you know, the Ghost of Christmas Past segment, because the interactions are so good. You know, I mean, my favorite part is when they're watching, you know, the Christmas party at Fezziwig's, and she's like, how long has it been since you danced, Ebenezer? And he's like, it's a waste of time. You didn't seem to think so back then. You didn't seem to think so back then. I still
think it's one of the greatest moments in cinema where he wakes up and he realizes that he hasn't missed Christmas after all, and then you just watch him turn back into a little child right in front of your eyes. I mean, it's just brilliant.
Yeah, I never read The Christmas Carol, so it seems...
Again, check out the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol on Amazon.com.
I got my own pimp here. Yeah, I heard the guy who wrote that's a real asshole.
Oh, Chris is gone.
Yeah, he has to go to work at some point, I think.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? I usually do these things for 2 hours, which means we'd have another half hour or so if you want to talk about something else.
I was wondering, okay, so in the comment section, like in the 9 years you've been on YouTube, I noticed like, you know, you debate theists, socialists, stuff like that. What is the most frustrating to deal with, either the theists or the socialists?
It's hard to say because it's more of a type of personality that's hard to deal with.
Oh, okay, not just.
You know, I can work with people who are just trying to figure things out, but it's the ones who are. It's the ones who are trying to. What's a good way of putting this? I guess it's just the ones who are. They're going to push their agenda no matter what, and their goal is to make you out to be stupid and stuff like that.
Or irreconcilably convinced that they're correct.
Do you think that's more prevalent, like within theists?
Not just that they're correct, but also that they have some kind of moral superiority that, you know, means that they don't have to play by the same rules as everyone else.
I see.
You know, they can demand that you know, support every last little, you know, jot and tittle of what you write, and then they never, you know, put forward anything for theirs.
When you said John Tittle, it made me think of, I thought you said Titter. for a second.
Dot and tittle. Dot and tittle. It's an expression.
Shane, do you remember that drama with he goes by Jim Jesus now? He's a handicap guy.
Oh God, I remember that guy.
Yeah.
Didn't he write some disparaging things about you on TV Tropes, or something about that?
I mean,
someone did something on me on TV Tropes, and then it got deleted or something.
It's such a shame. I think that you two can't make up, because I think he's got some good ideas, and usually he's a good person. I just think that one time he kind of, I don't know, he got weird about. He's a little weird about the nap. You know, he doesn't think that's a good way of convincing people about libertarianism, and I guess there are lots of other ways, but yeah, I just think that's a shame. And he has his own podcast that's sometimes pretty good that I also listen to sometimes. Just thought I'd mention that.
But as far as Doctor Who, I've only seen like with Christopher Eccleston. I haven't watched any of the old Doctor Who's or anything like that. Would you recommend the old Doctor Who's?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll say a personal favorite of mine is The Mind Robber. I really do love this.
That's a good one.
Troughton's era, but unfortunately most of it is lost.
Yeah, but what does it? Okay, there's some cheese eaters that exist, but there's a lot of good stuff too from Troughton's era. Tom Baker was the one I started watching, and he's just magnificent. But I don't think they've made a bad casting decision yet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I seen you posting on the Discord like the new Doctor, and it's a woman, and that's making a lot of people mad or something. Or
Well, there was one bad casting decision, but it doesn't count.
Which one?
Peter Cushing.
That wasn't a bad casting decision. He was good. He was good. I liked his.
No, but
I mean, the movies he was in could have been better written, but that's not his fault.
Yeah. Oh, true.
You guys, I don't think I've seen more than 5 Doctor Who episodes ever. Sorry to report.
Wait, new Who or classic Who?
Across both.
Well, he said Eccleston, and Eccleston was pretty awesome. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey! Eccleston was fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I really couldn't, like, after Eccleston, I couldn't even watch Tenet. I just was still stuck.
Get into Tenet, he's awesome.
Eccleston, in my opinion, is the Doctor that feels like he comes really
Whose phone is that?
His mood and temperament.
Keeps me in mind.
And Eccleston feels like he comes closest in his mood and temperament to Hartnell's Doctor, in my opinion.
Matt Smith is very Troughton-like. I think it was interesting because, when they found those Troughton episodes, one was The Enemy of the World. No way Matt Smith could have watched them. He wasn't anywhere near old enough. But there's this one point right at the beginning when Patrick Troughton is running down to the beach, and I swear it is exactly like how Matt Smith played him.
Oh, I watched The Enemy of the World. Lord Salamander?
Yeah, you remember at the beginning when they first get there and there's a beach and the Doctor's on the side and he runs down to the beach? He runs exactly. You could see Matt Smith being exactly like that.
Oh, God. I wish we could have gotten Finn on here. She would be geeking out.
Yeah. I need to get her back on the podcast.
Yeah.
Does she have an opinion on a lady doctor?
I think she's just about where we are. Like, as long as they're like a good casting choice, it doesn't break any of the any continuity or any of the.
Yeah, just wait and see what she's like.
Yeah.
What do you think about all the drama that's?
I love that it's pissing off both sides. I don't know if you guys saw that screed that Anita Sarkeesian posted about it. Oh, God.
What?
It's just like nothing makes these people happy. It's just amazing.
Oh, it has to be a person of color too. It can't just be.
Yeah. And then there was another one, I forget who, but one of the big feminists in the UK was like, oh, well, they just cast someone who's blonde-haired and blue-eyed to titillate people. She has hazel eyes, not blue, by the way. And they're just doing it to be sexy. And it's like, yeah.
They're doing it to be sexy. That's right.
So they're mad about a female lead?
Yeah.
People be satisfied.
I guess the male leads were not sexy to anyone. So
No. They've never had a sexy male as a lead. Never once.
Huh.
But do you think that's mostly kind of being drummed up, the controversy? Because I also hear say, hey, there's all these men's advocates and whatnot that are outraged over it. It's
But going back to Bastiat, is anyone familiar with the Bastiat versus Proudhon debate?
I've read about it. I don't know a whole lot about it.
Oh, that would be interesting to look at, actually.
I think that would be interesting. I don't see any videos on it. I've read most of the long commentary on it by Roderick T. Long, and it definitely does seem like an interesting debate for sure. Especially
Roderick Long's done some great stuff.
Oh yeah, and especially since it even brings to light that Proudhon, who many of the ANCOMs point to as like the original anarchist, later in his life adopted more free market principles. So
some actually
mutual.
The anarchism dates at least as far back as Lao Tzu.
Yeah, the whole when he questions the state and stuff like that. But like to be called the first anarchist, people usually point to Proudhon.
Yeah.
So, but it was definitely an interesting long commentary read, and might even sit.
Yeah, but Lao Tzu was basically: do you want to be a good leader? Stop leading. You want to be a good government? Stop governing. Stop doing all that.
Yeah.
That's a good paraphrase of about half of the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah, because I have it right here, so, but it could be.
I got several translations.
Can you send a link to that? What is this from Roderick Long? The history of anarchism? Or?
No. It's the Bastiat versus Proudhon debate. It's on praxeology.net. I can send you a link.
Yeah, please.
Are you on the Bogosity Discord?
I may have an account on there. I don't know if it's still active.
Oh, okay. Well,
J. Will Series, by the way, in the chat, I've kind of been trying to keep an eye over there, but there's a lot going on. But he says, mention one MRA who was bothered by the female Doctor Who. I don't know if he counts as an MRA, but Dave Hitt of the Quick Hits podcast.
Is he an MRA or is he a MGTOW? Because
I don't know. I don't know what the distinction is, but he's one of those, I'm not going to watch it. It's like, well, then how are you going to know if it's any good? It's not going to be good. Well, how do you know if it's good if you're not going to?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and post the link to that in the chat.
Okay. I think the question is whether it's or kind of organic or not. Was this the best person, or were they selected for?
Well, Chris Chibnall is taking over as producer, and I mean, she was a regular on Broadchurch, so he's worked with her for years. So.
I got your link. Thanks, man.
Oh, no problem. Another interesting thing I found, like in this exchange of letters, the one person who thought that Bastiat won was actually Karl Marx. Karl Marx actually thought that Bastiat won the debate. So
wow,
that's pretty interesting. Well, then again, Marx didn't really. He had a lot of criticisms of Proudhon as well, but
Well, yeah, Proudhon is more rooted in mutualism than Marxism or communism. So.
Yeah, so
it's mutualism.
But I have read a lot of stuff from Proudhon that talks about the social contract in not at all the sense the way they're talking about it today, but is what we would see as probably a more Lockean.
It's based more on I think a hybridization of Lockean and Rousseauan ideas rather than Hobbesian.
Yeah, it's definitely not a Hobbesian social contract.
But yeah, for those listening at home. Proudhon was a mutualist. Mutualism is actually more of a form of market socialist economics.
Yeah,
and that's Proudhon if you want to look him up.
What is market socialist? What does that mean?
Tall, short person.
It means the workers manage the means of production, but distribution is handled along market lines.
I mean, again, the whole thing, though, is like that could exist in, say, an anarcho-capitalist society. And anarcho-capitalist, no one's going to stop a cooperative from happening like that.
Yeah,
So,
you have to ignore that investment means anything, basically. So the person who invests something doesn't.
Yeah, I actually know
get
people
a higher portion.
downplay the value of investment.
The funny thing is with these co-ops, you have the people that start it up and they go through all the risk and the investment and they find the place and they do all this work, and then they hire somebody, and that person gets an equal share of all that beginning investment. That's kind of crazy, and maybe they don't even want that.
I mean, it also still comes down to what we were discussing earlier about like who actually owns the property, whether you own it because you labored into it or just because someone uses it. And I'm pretty sure we all agree that it should be the person who made it that owns it. So, like, especially if you want to get the full value of your labor, no one's stopping that. But if you,
I'd love to get Shepard or my friend Shepard or Pedro in on this.
Shepherd Dog.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm the opposite of Shepherd Dog because.
All right, you are a furry.
Yeah, so that's
But yeah, Shepard, right?
What's that?
Shepard, right?
Yeah, I talked to him like on Discord too.
Yeah, you're with us in the Crossroads, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I was in shitposting, and he was like, "Hey, it's I'm drunk," and I was like, "Hey," and I guess he just fell asleep. So, yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, you also see my exchange with the Union Socialists a lot too. You may see that.
Yeah. Actually, who oddly got along really well with Union?
Who?
Dapperton.
Dapperton? Oh yeah, like
those two got along really well.
I don't know, like Union Socialists, especially when you talk, he's just so laid back. So I mean.
Oh yeah, he's chill as all hell.
So I mean, it's all good.
Oh, yeah, we probably tear him apart if he was on here then.
I mean, when you start, of course, discussing private property and stuff like that, everything gets heated. But when you're just in a chat, just chilling, it's just like any conversation.
Yeah.
So, especially when it comes to property, that's when it gets heated.
That's the real contentious issue with everyone.
And like the justification, the use of force, it's yeah.
More people in the comments sticking up for the MRAs and saying it's really the MGTOWs who are the ones against the female Doctor Who.
Yeah, I really have
right. That's true.
I really have
to dispute that.
I really have to appreciate how a lot of the different ideologies and factions are actually communicating with each other a lot more now, rather than just like talking at each other.
Yeah. The Crossroads.
Sorry, it was on my mind.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, if I had more time to spend there, I would. But it's like I go there, after some amount of time, and there's another 500 messages. Like I don't have
time. And probably a vast majority of it is me role playing with Union Socialists.
Oh, you guys are
between that one and between Dapperton's Discord and Hoodie Demons and
yeah. Well,
I barely have time for mine.
I haven't talked to Hoodie in forever. When I met, I'll go into this in private.
Yeah, but so it's a banana.
Has he ever come on these hangouts? Has he been on one?
Who?
Has he been?
Yeah.
Hoodie's been a co-host at least once. So
He was a co-host. I don't know if he is going to come on a hangout because I don't know if his voice disguiser works when he's live or not. But he's staying anonymous.
He uses his voice disguiser on the podcast.
Yep.
I think your voice disguiser can work. I've seen Listen to Reason use it. So
actually, I remember when me and Ancom were setting up a debate that we were planning to have between the two of them.
Well, I know the filters he's using the ones in Audacity, so I don't know if they can be made to work live or not.
Because he at first had it on, and then it failed, and it went on for quite a long time without him even realizing it.
Maybe instead he could have a fan right next to him on his desk and just start talking into that. And just use that as a voice disguiser.
Yeah,
that would be annoying, but especially if you're trying to have a serious debate on the issue of property, that's just it's not gonna work.
So what you're saying is,
These little
So what-
property.
what you're saying is, it would pretty much blow.
Yeah, it would blow.
Grown.
Yeah. And let's see.
All right, are we winding down or?
I think it is about to wind down here, unless someone just brings something like absolutely outrageous, like
Truly outrageous.
yeah, like taxation isn't theft, or I don't know.
Oh,
Well,
I told you about that thing I once heard Sam Cedar say, right?
What's that?
Taxation is voluntary because you can choose to go to jail.
He didn't say that, did he?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the whole voluntary kind of thing comes down to coercion and stuff like that, and who's pointing the gun per se. Because I think we would all agree like coercion comes with. Oh, look, a dog.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking we need to go because I'm thinking he's wanting to be fed and let out and stuff.
Hey, what's
I'm the only one in the house right now, so
what's this one's name?
Frodo,
Hi, Frodo.
say hello.
He's so precious. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. What kind of dog is he?
It's a Chihuahua.
Yeah, my train
It's a
of thought. just
rescue.
went- My train of
It was
thought.
a
just went
rescue.
boop.
No, I hear Chihuahuas kind of usually attach themselves to one person, and they're pretty like skittish or unfriendly around others.
He likes women for some reason. He's a little more skittish around me. He likes me because I'm kind of the alpha, but he really likes women. We were shooting housekeeping. You see the poster back there. The housekeeper's murder scene we shot in my kitchen, and so there were 4 strangers over. There was John Jed, my co-producer.
Oh, if you shoot movies, I have a theater background, so
Cool. But there was the lady in the poster there, Zara Million. She played the housekeeper. And then there was the guy playing her husband, who's the one who kills her. That's not a spoiler, by the way. But and then the guy playing the husband brought his girlfriend by. So there were 4 strangers in the house, 2 male and 2 female. Frodo here loved the women, and he barked at the 2 men.
Yeah, Chihuahuas can be pretty mean. Like I noticed. So
He's not really one of the mean ones. He's a rescue, and they're usually a little more
I
chill.
tell you who are really friendly in my experience: Pomeranians.
Yeah.
And any sort of lab poodle mix.
Labs are just really sweet dogs.
Oh yes, absolutely.
yeah.
I had a golden retriever a long time ago.
Yeah, I have a pug mixed with a bulldog, so that's a
English
nice
or
combination.
American?
English. So
God, what that thing's face must look like.
Flat face.
yeah, I don't know. Pugs are adorable. I don't care.
hey, pugs are precious. Pugs are completely precious because they're like, it's like having a baby that's also like really old.
Yeah, they're just adorable. They're the best.
And the way they waddle, like pitter patter.
Yeah.
Oh, and if they're in a stroller, forget it.
Put a little bonnet on them.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, if you've ever seen a long-haired Chihuahua forced into a Santa Claus suit, oh my god! Yeah. My dad's. It's a long story, but there's this long-haired Chihuahua we had, and around Christmas, his owner would always dress him in a Santa suit.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen Piff the Magic Dragon, the Magic Act. He has a long-haired Chihuahua as part of his act.
And he would always have this look on his face like, what the hell?
Dogs generally have 2 reactions to having clothes put on them. Either they're kind of like, oh, I don't like this, and they're laying around all depressed, which means you shouldn't do that. Or they strut around like they're so proud.
This one was a strutter, I think, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't put clothes on your dog if it depresses them. That's just mean.
You will make them.
Yeah. All right, well, I guess we're out. I got to figure out what Frodo here wants. So.
Okay. Well, it was nice talking, Shane.
All right, thanks all of you for showing up. I guess we'll see you next time we do one of these.
Thanks, Dean.
Until next time, be aware and be wise. Oh, and stay strong and be free.
And furry.
Yeah, you're just ripping everyone off, aren't you? That's our intellectual property.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right, see you.
Bye.